Welcome back to Live Lunch. It's been
Too long.
too long. I was going to say we last did Live Lunch in March when we were at the Clarendon Villas with
Yeah.
Joel, me, and Megan. And so much has happened since. But we only have 20 minutes. So let's get into things. Matt, you've just literally come off the preaching
The
wooden block situation. I was going to say, what's the word that they use?
Pulpit.
The pulpit. Matt's just come off the pulpit. We've got the budget lunch situation. We've got coffees. We've got brioche buns. We've got the wonderful Christine with us. Matt, new sermon series called Story, going through the book of Exodus, the journey of the Israelites from Egypt to the Promised Land. Do you want to do a quick 2-minute summary on the preach so far?
Yeah, I can do. Yeah, so we're this story series. In fact, just by way of introduction, and particularly introducing Christine here as well, because we have kind of used this material in small groups for a number of years, going through Exodus to see how God brings about change in our lives. And so Christine and I have been working on that material, and we've seen it transform people's lives in a small group setting. And so this is the first time we've done it as a preaching series for the whole church. So it's really exciting to journey through together. And so this morning I was just kind of introducing this idea of change, transformation, the way that God does that, the way that God brings it about, how that it's something that Jesus wants to do to make us like himself, to transform us, and that kind of sometimes comes in conflict with what we want God to do, but it's tremendously good news for us. And it means that whatever circumstance we're in and whatever we face and have faced in life, there is hope, because actually Jesus is at work in us by his Spirit. And so, yeah, that's what we started off with this week. And then next week we'll actually get into the text of Exodus chapter 1 next week, and take it from there.
Brilliant. So we've put on a few questions which will really help us unpack the preach a little bit more. How can we practically apply the sermon, what we've just heard earlier this morning? Maybe if you're in a small group, some of these conversations that you could have. We hope that this will help facilitate conversation during your small group. But just before we get into some of the practical questions, just the whole desire for change. You know, the last episode of Live Lunch that we did pre-lockdown, we kind of, we had no clue of what was coming our way. We just thought, a couple of weeks of lockdown and then we're back out. Let's set down some goals and some things that we could do during this lockdown to make the most of the time. And I don't know about you, but I haven't done anything that I sat down to do. Lockdown just overwhelmed me, and just the season that we're in is just pretty full.
Christine has.
But I guess why the human desire for change and I guess to evolve when we can just be content with where we're at. I think it's really coming from a place of I'm tired. Lockdown and this season has been really hard.
Yeah.
And I don't want to think about something new. So hit me with it, mate.
Why? Well, I think we'll feel that desire for change, whether we're Christians or not. And as I said in the message, the sermon this morning, it's like some of us are very proactive with that, and some of us are very passive with that. Oh, we'd like things to change, but I think, well, Christian, you can say as well. I think it's something to do with the fact that we're made in the image of God. We're made for more. I don't know if you want to say any more on that.
Yeah, I think that before the fall, everything was great, and the fall happened, and because of that, we just have that sense there's something missing. There's something missing in our lives. We haven't got that good place. We haven't got that good relationship with God. But some of us aren't even aware that that's what it is. It just evidences itself as a kind of longing and a kind of emptiness that we just want something to be different.
Yeah. Shall I go through some questions that we got for our groups and that sort of thing? So let me do the questions, and then we can carry on the conversation, I suppose. The first question I kind of was talking about was like that thing we've just been talking about, really. We have that desire for change. That could be a sort of very big existential thing. It could be a very sort of small sort of change project thing. And I wonder if people in groups want to talk about the change projects, the things that we have embarked upon to improve ourselves, whether that's that couch to 5K or like a home building project or DIY, or I'm going to read these books or whatever. That's something to discuss. And then also the message I was talking about, the gap. We all like this is where we're at, and this is what we'd like our life to be, and really maybe for discussion about how do you relate to God? If you're a Christian, like how do you manage that? Do you get frustrated with God about that or not? And then thirdly, what areas of your life?
Center's coming down.
What areas of your life would you like to see God transform in you? So that's the question for discussion. Christian, you've got a good example of a change project that you've been embarking on over the last 6 months.
I've got two actually, but when lockdown began, and previously I hadn't been somebody who did any exercise other than just walking to work, and with the phenomena that is Joe Wicks.
I saw you on that every day.
I saw families in the church doing it, and I thought, I'll do this. It was a bit of a laugh, really. But actually, I'm still doing Joe Wicks every day. It's
every day?
5 days a week, I do a Joe Wicks exercise plan.
Wow. For the last 6 months.
Yeah.
That was another one of those things I started and stopped really,
there you go.
quickly.
Yeah. And the other thing is I decided to learn Hebrew. So I've been doing a bit of that every day as well, which is a lot tougher than the exercise.
Different kind of tough.
Yeah, different kind of tough.
Maybe you could do the Joe Wicks commentary in Hebrew.
Well, maybe one day. One day.
What about you, Matt? Have you done
The
anything?
thing is, when I described in the sermon about like different types of people, it may be surprising to some people, but I'm not that person that's like massively goal orientated. So I was kind of trying to think of examples for myself, and I do kind of start stuff, and I do very slowly follow through. I suppose my garden would be one of those things.
Carve's Garden. Follow Matt Carvel at
Well,
Carve's Garden.
if you do follow me on Instagram, you'll notice not much has happened for quite a long time, because it kind of starts and then it goes down for a while, and then it just it's in my mind, but the actual practicality of actually bringing the change to transform my garden into what it could be is slow.
We do strength finders, and one of my top strengths is an activator. So I like to start stuff, but I'm really poor at finishing.
Yeah.
So achiever is not high up. So starting stuff is more exciting than actually finishing it. My
Yeah.
wife Amy is the opposite. So she's an achiever.
Yeah.
So she would take time to start stuff. But when she does start something, man, she will see
Yeah.
it through the end and do an amazing job with it.
Yeah.
But I recently joined a gym. Ben Watson, Total Fit. Ben and Felicity Watson, actually.
Yeah,
they do here in this building. Hey, the square's gone. And it's been replaced with a gym.
Yeah.
So I've been on an emotional journey
wow.
through lockdown. The wonderful coffee shop that I helped start is gone. But we've been replaced by an even more wonderful gym and training. And so I am hoping to lose my gut.
You enjoying it so far?
It's
Or
been
is
pretty
enjoying the wrong
brutal.
word?
It's pretty brutal, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't use the word enjoying, but
Yeah,
I feel
yeah.
a sense of satisfaction later on in the day when my body has adequately recovered. But
There's a
that's what
certain
I'm doing
type
Total
of-
Fit.
Of self-righteousness that comes when you have a really good workout. Do you not find that? I find that. You just sit there and think, I've done a workout this morning. And you guys haven't.
Is that just a Matt Carvel personality
That's
thing?
something that I need to
Feeling
repent of.
self-righteous?
But the rare
think
times
so.
that I do go for a run in the morning, that comes to mind.
But we should crack on.
Anyway, yeah.
So the next question that you spoke about was, what ways have you felt a gap between what your life is and what you would like it to be? There's some examples, and then what would you encourage people who are feeling there's a real sense of gap in where I want to be? How can we bridge this gap?
Yeah, I think many times, as I say, when we've done this material in small groups and that sort of thing, and different people sharing their story, I think that's a common thing of just getting stuck. I think sometimes when you become a Christian, you can feel that you make a lot of progress quite quickly. The transformation between what you were and what you are now is quite stark sometimes. But then you get a few years or even decades down the line, and it's like, well, you look back, am I really changing? Can I really detect this? And then I think that's when the sort of discouragement, can start to creep in. And I think partly that's because, part of the becoming more like Jesus is being more aware of our sin and our weakness. And I think that is a good thing, but it can feel like a discouraging thing. I know I've experienced that.
I guess our threshold for sin goes really the way in which you just get super particular about it. So what was considered acceptable and alright before you became a Christian now suddenly seems the bar kind of raises significantly higher. Which is why I'm really aware of.
Yeah,
changing
and I think that people can get very discouraged and sometimes disappointed, feel that maybe God hasn't answered their prayers. Those are kind of things that people get stuck in those areas. Having a wrong view of God at the beginning, we're full of love for Jesus, but sometimes we pick up stuff that's not true about God, and we don't see him as a father who loves us. So then we feel that we have to please him, and we can get into all sorts of things like legalistic behaviour. I've got to do this so that God will do this. And it's not a bargaining situation. God gives us everything we need for life and godliness, but we can get into that and we take ourselves off on a bit of a tangent, really. And I think the other thing is that we don't only listen to lies about God, but we also listen to lies about ourselves. So if we have got a tape running in our head that's saying I'm no good, for example, or God doesn't love me, then it's really difficult to move forward with God and to actually relate to him about the things that we want him to change if we don't feel like he is that loving father who wants to, be actively involved in our lives.
Yeah. Just on the topic of that, an amazing book that I read during lockdown, Gentle and Lowly.
Don't get Christine started on this.
It is, isn't it? It's phenomenal.
Absolutely phenomenal. Dane Ortlund.
Dane Ortlund. Stop what you're doing right now, including watching Livelunch, and go and read it. Gentle and Lowly. It is an extraordinary book. And it really helps you. It just changes your perspective on who God is. And it's called Gentle and Lowly, the heart of God towards sinners and sufferers.
Yes.
And just speaks such truth about who God is. And his love and his heart for people is mind-blowing.
I think the really big thing about that book is that it says that rather than our sin repelling Jesus,
absolutely,
he's drawn to our sin because he wants to help us and he wants to be with us in it.
Like a doctor to a patient.
So helps all that stuff, doesn't it? About I'm not good enough and all that sort of thing. He actually wants to be with us and help us because he's been through it. And he empathises with us, and I could go on about that, but I think it's amazing.
It's great. It's great. Yeah, and I think that's similar to what we were saying in the sermon as well. Like we have a view that what's God doing in my life? Like God wants me to be better, and he's kind of waiting for me to improve myself and be better, rather than seeing what God wants to do. Like what God is doing in our lives is transforming us, and actually sin's not a problem for God. He's dealt with that with Jesus, and so actually bringing that to him, coming back to him, saying, God, what are you doing? Let me follow you.
What would you say? I think just to just go in a bit deeper into what you just said. So if somebody is in a moment of just feeling vulnerable, feeling, man, there's such a gap in my life. I'm clearly not, or this behavior, or this pattern, or this unanswered prayer is causing like a gap in my relationship with Jesus. In that moment, what would you advise them to do?
Look to the Psalms. See what David did. He'd committed the terrible sin, hadn't he? And what does he do? He pours it out to God. Just start pouring it out to God. And I mean all the mucky stuff. I think sometimes we pretty up what we want to say to God and we make it refined, but actually what we need to do is just bare our hearts to him and start talking about it with him.
Because if God wants to, which he does, wants to transform our hearts, then it begins with us being honest with our hearts as well, and saying where we are. Sometimes we, for reasons that we've already kind of touched on, want to sort of present a front to God and say, okay, God, but not actually bring our hearts to him. Yeah. And I think that's where it starts.
Yeah, I think also we do need hope, because it's hard, isn't it, when we feel like things haven't gone right, and we need to think again about remind ourselves of the good things that God has already done, because that's again something that we see in the Psalms a lot, is repeating the story of what God's done, so we see what his character's like and what his works have been like, and think about that for our own story. What has he already done? Because that inspires faith in us to hope for more, doesn't it? And I think sometimes we can get locked into this, nothing ever happens, nothing's going to change, but actually the biggest change of all has already happened in our lives. We've been set free from the power of sin and death, and that, I think we just lose sight of that, actually.
The other thing I was going to say as well is I've recognised in my life, we live in a very fast-paced world, and we want change to happen in terms of days and weeks. And I recognise in my life, God tends to be more patient and he brings change about us in months and years and decades. Like that's what his timescale is. And sometimes when we're in those days and weeks and you say, God, just get me out of this, but actually when we look back, and similar to what Christine said about reminding ourselves what God has done, okay, but he, you know, it doesn't feel like God's done much this week, but look at what God's done over the last month, year, like where were you before, what's he done, and sometimes taking stock of that gives us that perspective that God is working, but when we're so close in, zoomed in, we can't quite see it, but when we zoom out, there's a huge thing. And I think anyone who's been a Christian any length of time will recognize that actually God has done a lot over decades, but we might not see it on a certain day perhaps.
His timing is perfect. At the right time, stuff will happen.
Yeah.
I think also just to say, we're not meant to go through these struggles by ourselves. We're meant to be in community.
Yes,
so please
absolutely.
talk to your small group leader. Just talk, and people will encourage you. So yeah, I think last question before we need to wind up. The question you asked is which, and I think this is a conversation for your small group. Which areas of your life would you like to see Jesus transform you? But I think other than just the immediate answers, how do you identify what areas in life you need transformation in? Or are there just blind spots that you may have? Or really, what are we looking at to say, hey, I'm not there yet, there's a gap. And how can I help identify what those areas are in my life that I could grow in?
Yeah, I think there's a number of things you can say on that. I think it's partly what you just said then about being in community. Sometimes we don't recognise, and what with this, even talking about story, the temptation might be to become very introspective. And what's my story about? And what's God doing? That sort of thing. And I think actually often these things are worked out. I mean, even the things that I was talking about, sort of the reflections that I had in my life about what's God doing, that my comfort not being as high on God's priority list, that has come out in me by me talking with someone else about this is what I'm feeling, this is why it's hard, and even just externally processing that and being encouraged and praying together and that sort of thing. That reflection has come out through talking. It's not just me in a room and revelation has suddenly come on to me. It actually happens in community. So I think discerning it happens when we journey with other people.
Brilliant. Well, we've got to finish now. Thanks so much for tuning in to Livelunch. So good to have you guys back.
It's great to be back.
Bring us more food, man. We need
Next time.
We need kokoro and things like that. But have a lovely day, week, and be blessed. See you later.